What about for the private investigator scenes? Did you take on any new skills, learn how to pick any locks or anything like that?
Well, weirdly enough, when I first started acting, I needed to pick up some extra money and I ended up getting a job working for a private detective.
Oh,
And I was wired and things like that. So I kind of had actually a little weird life experience of that world. And I think Peggy doesn't need much to feel like an expert in anything. And I think, Peggy has that survival aspect where you walk into a room and you kind of notice a bunch of things. Where's the danger? Where's the escape hatches? What can you get out of this room? Not necessarily the way that I perceive things, but that's the addict part of her. That's like, kind of evaluating things in that way.
hi, welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation Conversations at Home. I'm Jenelle Riley with Variety. Joining us today is an Academy Award-winning actress you've seen in films like Boyhood and recently on screen in Severance. She is also a two-time Emmy and SAG Award winner. Please welcome Patricia Arquette. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
And I always love to go back and actually start at the beginning and ask, was there a moment you sort of realized you wanted to be an actor or performer? I know your family was already in the arts, so I don't know if it was a foregone conclusion or maybe the opposite, where, you thought you would rebel by becoming a lawyer or something.
I definitely had a conflict at a certain point about either wanting to be a midwife or an actor. But I knew I was more afraid of, and there was a much higher risk of failure of trying to be an actor. I mean, there was a part of me that, acting was such a part of our lives. Like it was part of how we played. My dad was an actor. My grandfather was an actor. My great grandparents were actors in vaudeville. So it was part of how we played games. My dad was a part of story theater, improvisation. It was the first thing I ever did was a play of story theater at the Philadelphia Folk Festival when I was like 5. So it was always a part of my life, but I was afraid of failure. And my sister at that time was becoming a very popular actress, young actress, and that kind of scared me too. I was comparing myself like, oh, I don't think I'm as pretty as my sister. And I don't think I'm as brave as my sister. And so I was kind of comparing myself, and that she was very supportive, like, we're all different. There's many different kinds of roses in the garden. And if you want to try that, she ended up paying for my acting class. So I thought I would give it like a real shot for a year and make myself willing to fail every day for a year. And then I got a job, and then I was terrified getting a job. It was like, oh my gosh, I have to hit this mark, but not look at the ground. So every failure, I felt like if I still rose to the next occasion and tried, was a win,
Mhm.
you know.
What was that first job, if you don't mind me asking?
It was called Pretty Smart. It was
Oh,
like a teenage kind of a movie, and it was like a crazy shooting experience. But I made some great friends, and I turned 18 on that job. And yeah, it was really, really informative and a very difficult shoot. And my sister was like, that's not how most shoots are. So don't give
really?
up. Because I was kind of like, I don't know if this business is for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
First jobs can have such an impact on actors too, about like, whether they think they want to continue with this or not. So,
yeah, yeah, for sure. It really can. It can be, and they all have their own nature. And a lot of it has to do with, people that are in a lot higher positions than we usually are. So, or some of the bigger actors can also set the mood for better or worse on a set.
hmm well, again, congratulations on High Desert, which is just like, the next in this long line of television wonderful characters you've played. And I know this comes to us from a powerhouse trio of women. Uh, you've played so many roles, but I'm not sure that I've seen you play someone like Peggy Newman before, because she's kind of a mess. She's a recovering addict, obviously, but she also has this brilliant mind that makes her an ideal private detective. I understand this project actually came to you quite some time ago, but sort of in a different form. What interested you in working with these creators and playing this character?
they just had such interesting voice that they wrote with together. And it was very funny and sardonic and had a certain, interesting perspective of the world. And then I'd known people like Peggy in my life, like these disasters, but then they have a beautiful heart and they have this part of them that's like magical and loving and beautiful and disastrous and destructive at the same time. And how painful that is. I mean, she's an addict, and to be in the grips of addiction and all the, I think, all the veils that you cover yourself with to not feel, because that's really what addiction's there for, right? To not feel whatever pain or not have the capacity to process your emotions and your pain. I've known a lot of people like that, and I loved a lot of people like that, and I've lost a lot of people like that. So there was also parts of this character that reminded me of my sister Alexis, although she wasn't an addict. She always was collecting broken bird people and kind of, also had a real flair for fashion and art and things like that. So it was a bit of an homage to her too.
I mean, I find Peggy to be overall like a very joyous and hopeful character, but she is a recovering addict, and the series doesn't shy away from that. Did you take on any like new research or preparation? It sounds like, obviously addiction has touched everyone to some degree. But was there any special preparation you took on for the part?
Well, I already knew how to drive stick shift, so that dune buggy was quite easy to jump through. I mean, there was just stuff like, learning little dance things and stuff like that, but more just, I think for me recently, especially like when I was younger, when you play the girlfriend, it's really only so much you can kind of do, but being able to do character work is super fun. And working on her meter and the way that she moves and the way that she talks, and working with Jay Roach, our director, like he's like, Peggy's like a rock and roll hummingbird, she's like constantly moving, a little bit of a live wire. So more also understanding the underpinnings of her grief. She really covers with a lot of life force. She has a very powerful life force, despite all the things that she's gone through, and she's a super good hustler and survivor. So it was more playing with those kind of dynamics.
You mentioned the dance moves, and something that I love about the series is Peggy works at this old pioneer town, old Westy kind of show, which I just love. I don't know that we've ever really seen that in a TV show before, and I'm a fan of those things. I love going to like the night battles and all that stuff. Did you take on any specific research for those scenes? Have you maybe you did jobs like that when you were starting out?
Well, it's like before we sold it, I was talking about Pioneer Town and stuff like that, and I went to Joshua Tree, and I sent the writers all these pictures of me there and all these different kind of locations I thought were really interesting out there. And the nature of the desert I thought was very interesting for Peggy, and who she is as a person. But I also love that. And I love the theatrical quality of the things that Peggy spins magic out of really weird circumstance. She'll meet a stranger and then decide to make a play, a therapeutic play, kind of crazy things like that. She's a big dreamer, Peggy.
I grew up in a town that had like a small, very independent theme park that had like kind of a pioneer town, and
Wow.
the women's saloon characters were the most sought after jobs you had to graduate to that. Yeah.
Wow.
And I
Wow.
love it kind of shows that dynamic. Like Peggy is really the queen bee, you
Oh
know.
yeah. She is really the queen bee. Yes, definitely.
What about for the private investigator scenes? Did you take on any new skills, learn how to pick any locks or anything like that?
Well, weirdly enough, when I first started acting, I needed to pick up some extra money, and I ended up getting a job working for a private detective. And I was wired and things like that. So I kind of had actually a little weird life experience of that world. And I think Peggy doesn't need much to feel like an expert in anything. And I think, Peggy has that survival aspect where you walk into a room and you kind of notice a bunch of things. Where's the danger? Where's the escape hatches? What can you get out of this room? Not necessarily the way that I perceive things, but that's the addict part of her. That's like, kind of evaluating things in that way.
She's also a really good actor. I mean, the way that she's like able to put on a character, just in the blink of an eye and like scare off a collector or something. She thinks she's really fast on her feet. And I'm like, she's actually a good performer.
Yeah, she is. I mean, that's the thing, about people like her. You sometimes through fire, you have to really forge a lot of skill sets.
Mhm.
And I think she does. And I think she loves people, really. And she loves being in the mix of it. And she loves sorting it all out. She loves questioning everything. And she really is her own person. And she doesn't go by the beat of the normal drum. And she doesn't feel like she needs to participate in the normal experience. And so it's interesting the choices that she makes.
She's so fearless. And I feel like playing a character like that, do you find that sort of bleeds over into your real life? Well, you're probably pretty fearless anyway, but I don't know if you start to like adopt some of like, Peggy's bravado.
Um, it was funny actually playing her. I think maybe helped me a little bit to more see people who are a little bit on the hustle. I was kind of a good mark. I want to feel like I was kind of a good mark, but playing her and seeing the way a little bit that she sees the world, I think I've been able to see through some people a little better.
Really? See, I'm very gullible, so I would definitely be on the Mark side. Yeah.
I still am too. Somebody pulled a little fast move on me the other day, not a bad one, but I was like, okay, I have to tell you, I'm really gullible. Is this really your job? They told me that they were teaching baton twirling to Parkinson's patients. And I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. And I was like, maybe they're pulling my leg.
Were they
I mean,
being serious? Because I could believe
no,
it.
they were pulling my leg. Yeah.
I would think of anything after, doing the act, you would know to be very suspicious of people.
Wow, that was super scary character.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to do that to your kid, is really far out. The need for validation, exterior validation from people, and not to be abandoned, and all the layers that were going into that, and that kind of narcissistic at any cost, no matter what hurt I'm causing somebody else. That kind of psychological mixture. I mean, that's really fun. It's like figuring out the underpinnings of all these different people.
What do you think, you've done so many different roles and genres. What do you think has been your most challenging role?
There was one role, and I'm not crazy about the cut, and it's kind of sad because, I saw what the other actor was doing, and then I know some of the work that I did, but there was this character in this movie called The Wannabe, and I had decided early on that she sort of had a subconscious suicidal streak. And that thing, she was very mercurial. And there was something about tapping into that frame of mind that was actually a bit scary. Not that I felt suicidal, but there was a propulsion to that person, a propulsion to that drive that I'd never experienced really in my own self. And that was really a little bit disturbing.
Do you have a way to sort of let go of or sort of shake characters at the end of the day or end of a shoot?
Yeah, usually I'm very clear on that. Like even with Medium, I was like, I want to protect myself actually, and I don't, this is not me. And so I do very conscious things like the act. Of course, I was like apologizing before every scene, and then afterwards I'm like, I'm leaving this lady here. Like I am very clear for my sanity. This person's going to exist between action and cut. And that's where you get to experience everything. But there are a few characters that have kind of bled through that lady I was telling you about in that movie, The Wannabe, that kind of weird thing. And then Tilly in Escape at Dannemora, there was just a low level depression that I think came along with that character. And then just also seeing in society how people perceive you when they have decided you're no longer have value to them in some kind of way. And they're looking past you, through you. You're like an invisible person. So that's not, I mean, I really gained all that weight for that part. And it was like, that's not a costume. The world is interacting with their view of what that means and projecting that onto you. And you're dealing with that 24/7. So it's not even something that you're necessarily bringing with you. The world is putting it back on you all the time.
You mentioned Escape from Dannemora, which was one of your many fruitful collaborations with Ben Stiller, who I also noticed is an EP on this show. I don't know if you brought him on board, what you felt he could contribute as a producer.
Yeah, I did bring him on board. I mean, and also Jay knew him and they'd worked together. So it was kind of, there was a lot of love there. And Ben's wife is in the show, even though had nothing to do with Ben. Yeah, I love Ben. He makes me laugh a lot. I think he has really good taste and he really understands comedy in a very specific high level way. And so it was really a blessing to get to work with him in a whole different way.
I mean, he's someone who has cast you in so many like diverse roles, from Severance to Escape from Dannemora. You probably have a few people like this in your life, but what is it like to have a collaborator who sees you in all these roles and maybe things that you wouldn't necessarily see yourself in?
I feel so grateful for that. I think it's beautiful. It's like when I think of the actors in like old England or even early America, when they would travel around in troops and like covered wagons or horseback and go from town to town, and they would do different plays and they would play different parts in these different plays. And to have that kind of a community is so cool. I can't even tell you. It feels so fun and I feel so grateful, knock wood, to have had these experiences. And it's very rare because a lot of times really people, they want the next experience and they want to see someone else's process, which is totally understandable. But it's fun to grow and you get a shorthand with somebody. That's really nice. And a mutual trust gets built, I think.
Something else that is kind of a common theme along a lot of your work is you're always part of these amazing ensembles, and High Desert is no exception. And I love the dynamic you have with all these different actors. Your scenes with Brad Garrett as the private investigator who also kind of becomes your reluctant mentor.
Yeah, yeah.
Those are so fun.
I love him. We got to work with Bernadette Peters and Rupert and also Matt Dillon. And it was kind of a dream cast. There was all people that I've always wanted to be able to work with. And also you couldn't wish for nicer people. Couldn't hope for people that were more collaborative and generous and sweet and fun and funny, you know?
Matt Dillon, when he shows up as Peggy's husband, Denny, first of all, for some reason, just in my mind, I thought you two had worked together before. It seems like such a natural pairing, and I really kind of had to rack my brain. This is your first time acting together, isn't it?
It is, and I'd grown up a fan of his and always wanted to work with him. There's something that he has such a natural quality, and it reminds me so much of so many people I grew up with. There's an aspect of his personality, and he's a super smart actor and asks really interesting questions and kind of drills into the material in an interesting way. And that's part of what I still love about acting is every day you learn more about acting by watching good actors in their process, you know?
And you two have chemistry. Like right off the bat, I was like, I would like to see this continue into, maybe some other spin-offs or, maybe a nice rom-com.
Yeah, I mean, I loved working with him and it was super fun. And I felt like I'd known him my whole life, you know. The minute I met him, I really felt like that.
You also have, the brilliant casting of your daughter playing a younger version of Peggy. I don't know
Oh,
if you remember this, but I was a big fan of her in the movie she did with Rebecca Hall, and I didn't realize she was your daughter. And I saw you at a screening. I was like, "Oh, what brings you here?" And you're like, "I'm her mom." I was like, "Oh my
yeah.
God, she's amazing."
Yes, I know. It was so exciting. Yeah, my daughter Harlow Jane, she was in she came to me and it was funny because we have different last names. And one of the critics wrote, like, Harlow Jane is really great. She's like a young Laura Dern. And I was like, I was like, kind of, but
That's
a bit
amazing.
different. But she's definitely her own person. And really, and I'm not saying this because I'm her mom, because I really am the harshest critic as far as acting goes. And I also believe in the truth with other artists if they ask, you know, your opinion on something. And I ask that of others. Um, but truly, like I'll see sometimes her auditions and I'm like, Harlow, I would never have made those choices when I was that age. I'm really super impressed. I'm blown away. Like, forget it that I'm her mom. I would want to work with her if I saw her work.
It's kind of a bummer you didn't have any scenes together since she's playing you, but I suspect that, she'd been studying you her whole life, so it was probably easy for her. I shouldn't say easy, but like, because she's not playing you, she's playing Peggy. But
Yeah, she and I did a play reading for a friend recently. And we have this, it was just one night and we were just reading through it, you know, just a read through. And we had this fight scene. And whoa, man, I kind of broke character because I was just like I was kind of in awe of where she was so connected, you know, and it was really powerful. And then somebody was like, "Whoa, that was super meta," because there's little aspects of her voice that sound like your voice. And then you guys were yelling like, and it was almost like, I don't know, this kind of, whoa, I hear that.
I love that. Something else that's kind of unique about High Desert is you have the same director for all 8 episodes, and not just any director, but Jay Roach, who is, a master of tone because the show is funny and weird and,
Mhm.
sometimes scary and suspenseful. What was it like to have one consistent director guiding the season, particularly him?
It was so great. I mean, there's no nicer man than Jay Roach. Like he's so zen. Everything's okay. He really knows all the aspects of the material and he's really supportive of everybody and the whole crew and the whole process. Like it's that kind of archetypal father type of energy that's really chill and great and but knows so much about these things that you're talking about, those kind of tones, those kind of moments. And also to explore. He gives you a lot of room to explore and to bring things and to improve material. And he's just really wonderful. I miss him a lot. Yeah. I miss everybody, really, all of them.
It is interesting because it's one of those shows that we're like, I'm laughing hysterically, and I'm wondering, is anyone else laughing at this? Because it's a little twisted. Do you,
Yeah.
I know a lot of that is in the writing, but then when you're on set, do you perform the scenes to like different degrees and it's found in editing, or you're all sort of on the same page about you're just all equally weird?
On this, we kind of knew there was like a little bit of a zany quality, you know, something like early Coen brothers, you know, different kind of genres that are like that, like the Big Lebowski or whatever, you know, a little zaniness going on. I wasn't sure if the comedy would, I knew it was a kind of off-kilter comedy that certain people understand, but I wasn't sure if it would translate internationally, but it got incredible reviews in other countries. And it was really interesting to see, you know, what comedy translates and what comedy doesn't.
Mhm. I mean it as a compliment when I say that the writing feels so organic and real. It makes me wonder, also knowing Jay's background, was there any improv on set?
really a tiny bit, you know, more like in rehearsals and stuff, or like, I'm not sure about this line. And then they would come up with like 15 different things. Like they were so fast on, or, well, you know, thought process wise, would she be asking this or that? Or maybe this is a better con, this angle. And then they would come up with really funny things, ways to do that. So, yeah, there was a lot of collaboration, I think, early on about writing it. Like I'd had an experience after my mom passed away where I saw this woman that looked like my mom, and me and Alexis were kind of having this conversation about and watching this woman who looked like she could have been our mom. Um, so telling them that story, they made this whole kind of other experience with Bernadette Peters. So there was a lot like that, but you know, I wasn't telling him what ended up in High Desert. It was just a little tiny strange thing where we were talking about grief. We were talking about losing our moms. We were talking about experiences that we'd had, you know? So also there's sometimes as an actor anchors you have with characters, things like that, losses like that. And even though Peggy is based on Nancy's sister, one of the head writers. And ultimately her sister passed away. And at the time we shot this, Alexis had already passed away. So there was an ennui we both had for our sisters and a love and of the wildness of our sisters. And how they were just like such unique creatures in the world, you know? And how do you capture the love of a unique person?
Somebody
But
was
I laughed a lot on this set, and we all laughed so much. And I feel like after COVID, this was like such an incredible gift to have this joy. And I think joy is an important part of life.
So Bernadette Peters was signed on to play the mother of your character. Did your story sort of result in her having that second role where she plays the mother's lookalike?
No, well, I had told them that story. Yes, there was already going to be a mother. So maybe that was some impetus for that other part, but just that tiny little experience that I had. And then they made this whole other experience of Ginger, the actress. Yeah.
What I'm hearing is Bernadette Peters owes you 20%.
I love Bernadette Peters. Yeah. I mean, what a love bug, you know, and another person that I grew up watching. Like, I never thought I would get to even meet Bernadette Peters, let alone work with Bernadette Peters or become friends with her, you know. But again, that there are these people that sometimes you work with and you go, wow, they're everything I ever wished they would be.
Hmm. Does it take a moment to sort of get over, like the first time you meet Bernadette Peters, you just kind of want to stare and, you know.
Yeah. I still want to stare at Bernadette Peters.
Yeah. You mentioned at the top about, being on a set and how like, the person, the lead or the person at the top can really set the tone for the set and the atmosphere. Do you think about sort of, I don't want to say burden, but do you think about that responsibility, being first on a call sheet, sort of the tone you want to set or the atmosphere you want to help create and foster?
I mean, there's always stuff that like I'm always chiming in behind the scenes, certain things that I think could be done better to support the crew, or that this actor doesn't have what they need, or they've been working too much, or they're having a hard time at home and you know, some health problem with somebody at home. And so we need to help them with their schedule, you know, like would help them to get a 4-day weekend or whatever, stuff like that. Like I'm always a little bit working behind the scenes like that. But then also there's a part of me that's very insulary when I'm working. You know, I feel a lot of responsibility. So sometimes I'm like, I get nervous that I'm going to forget my lines. I feel like, okay, especially when you're doing TV or you're moving super fast or you're shooting 8-day episodes like this, like you want to have it all in your head. And then are you forgetting anything? And are you making the right choices even before you start shooting? So I think there's times where I'm kind of also just kind of pulled into myself. to reserve, where I know like people have said like Robin Williams is like, hello, what's your name? What's your name? What's your name? What's your name? He gave a lot out. I care about everybody a lot, but I guess I just am struggling with my own feeling of overwhelmed responsibility sometimes. So I kind of go insulary a little bit.
Absolutely. Well, again, I want to remind everyone watching at home that all episodes of High Desert are now on Apple TV Plus, so people can stream and watch it again and again. I want to thank you so much for being here and again sharing your craft and your process with your fellow actors.
Oh, thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Thanks for having me and thanks for taking this time.
Of course. Just want to know if she gets out of the canon.
We'll never know.
I know that's what's scary.
I
She's a
know.
survivor. She'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks so much.